Welcome to the homebaking.org kitchen. Today we'd like to share with you how to make a rustic tart, particularly how to make the pastry for any pie or quiche you'd like to make. It's a simple process, best done cold. So you won't be able to tell this from the camera, but this is a cold chilled bowl or pan, and the flour itself is even cold. I've had it in the refrigerator. You want your shortening or butter to be cold. In this case, we're using half butter and half shortening, and we're cutting it into small chunks. The actual recipe can be found on homebaking.org. Those tablespoon-sized chunks are fluffed in with flour, which is half whole wheat and half all-purpose. In some cases, you might even use a little cornstarch to soften your flour, and we give you those directions as well. And you toss those chunks of butter or shortening in with the flour and the salt. This mixture then you begin to cut up. And a recipe will tell you to cut the shortening and butter into pieces the size of peas. So today I brought a few peas just for you to kind of take a look at the size of a pea. Now you can use a bench knife, which is what I'm using. You can use a pastry cutter, which comes in all shapes and sizes, and again you'll cut the fat through the flour until it resembles the size and shape of peas. This will take you a few minutes, so be patient. So after you've cut the pieces of fat into the flour and the salt, it looks about like this. And you'll see that certainly those chunks of butter are not the exact size of a pea, but about that size. Now you're ready to add iced water. And that's important, again, to use all the cold temperatures you can, because the butter will start to melt in the flour, and then you won't have that layering effect that you want with pastry. So we're going to spoon about 3 big spoonfuls together in the pan. Now you're going to literally toss the water into the flour and butter mixture. And you want to toss it until you see that all the flour is now dampened enough so that it will cling together. If you look, you don't see much loose flour anymore in that mixture. So I'm going to go ahead and take my hands and press that dough together. You don't want to knead it at all. You're just pressing it until it forms a nice ball of dough. Now if it crumbles apart too much, that means there's maybe not. See, you can see how dry that is in the middle. I still need a little more water, so I'm going to give just a couple more drops. There's our crust dough. So now we're ready to roll it out and fill it. A pie or a rustic tart, when it's filled with fruit, is very simple to do. Again, you can use frozen fruit, or in this case, we have such great apples right now. So I'm using a Jana Gold apple and a couple of other apples that were in my refrigerator. What I mix with them is I put some dried cherries in there just for some extra tartness. And then this mixture I put over the top is a little bit of cornstarch, sugar, a dash of nutmeg, and cinnamon. And again, those specific amount is at homebaking.org, and we'll be happy to share our recipe with you. You stir that, and the sugar helps pull a little bit of juice out of the fruit, and we just simply coat the whole filling. That's ready then to go inside the pie or the rustic tart, which we're making today. When you're ready to roll out the crust for your tart or your pie, you can use a couple of things to help you. I rely on all the help I can get. I like to use wax paper or parchment paper to roll the dough between. Today I'm just going to use the wax paper, and you'll take 2 sheets that are big enough for the dough to be as big as your pan or your plate. For a tart, you don't need anything fancy. You can use a cookie sheet, you can use a pie plate, or just a plain plate that can go into the oven. Just because it's pretty, I'm going to use the blue plate today. I'll take a little bit of flour and just sprinkle that between my sheets of wax paper. And again, you don't want very much. You do not want a lot of flour left over on the surface of your dough, or it just simply dries the pie crust dough out. So now what we'll do, we'll take a little flour, we'll just lightly coat that and put our 2 sheets of wax paper on either side. You always roll from the center out so that you don't overwork the crust. If it's a hot, humid day, you may get to this stage and say, this is not working, and you can just take this piece of dough and the wax paper and put it in the refrigerator and let it chill until the fat is no longer sticky or too stiff to work with. You can turn it when it's in wax paper or parchment paper. It turns easily. You can just turn the dough. The one thing you don't want to do is get in a practice of rolling back and forth over the surface. It just toughens it. You work with it until you have it about 1.5 inches larger than the plate or the pie pan that it's going to go on. Now that we have the pastry big enough, we can go ahead and shape our tart. And again, there's a reason why they call it rustic, because it's not the beautiful lattice shape that we so often see. Instead, it's definitely a rustic, quick production. You take your pastry and you simply fill the middle with your fruit that's been spiced and sweetened if it needs it. And of course you need your thickener on there. That could be flour or cornstarch. And we're going to fill the center with that fruit. Now your oven should be preheated at this point and hot, so you can just pop this in there. It's not a good time to start heating your oven now, so have it ready. And usually you start it hot, 425 degrees in this case. And then you just simply make sure that pile of fruit, especially with apples, they cook down, is really tall. You take the edge and just tuck it up. It always reminds me of the old-fashioned apple dumplings we used to have at the fair. But you just take that edge and tuck it up, and you kind of pinch it as you go, and it will just stick because it's a moist dough. Now you can dot a little butter in there too for flavor. Tuck your fruit so that it's attractive but not going to fall down the sides. If you want to dress it up just a little, you can brush the sides with cream or milk and sprinkle a little coarse sugar on the outside, or cinnamon and sugar if you prefer. Now that you have it shaped, it's ready to be baked. You'll bake it for 40 to 50 minutes, and you may want to turn the oven temperature down halfway through. But once it's done, the fruit cooks down a little bit and you're ready to serve it. As long as it's cool enough to handle, you're ready to cut. And there's your piece of tart.